Today you will hear the testimony of Yusuf Rahman, a judge who believed he was the voice of justice, but ended up discovering that he was serving darkness. For years, he signed death sentences against Christians in the name of Allah, until the day a cross appeared before him. It all began with a video by the American debater Charlie Kirk, which he watched by chance, and which planted the doubt that would change the course of his life. The man who judged became the one being judged, and the courtroom turned into the setting of a divine encounter that challenged his own faith, his culture, and his past. From absolute power to spiritual collapse, Yusuf would face an invisible war where the judge would have to beg for mercy and for his life. And to begin, make sure you are already subscribed, like the video, and tell me where you are watching from, because this story is going to move you deeply.
I grew up believing that justice was the greatest reflection of God on earth. From a very young age, I heard my father say that to serve the law was to serve the Creator, and I took that to the extreme. I was born into a respected family, where tradition and honor were non-negotiable pillars. From the age of 12, my days were divided between school, the study of the Quran, and long sermons about discipline and obedience. There was no room for doubt, emotion, or questioning. Being a judge was the destiny written for me, and when I achieved that title before turning 30, society applauded me. I was seen as an example, a man of faith, a symbol of authority, someone who carried the weight of the law on his shoulders and pride in his chest. My office was cold, silent, and filled with echoes, piles of case files stacked up on the desk, and each paper represented a destiny. When I signed a sentence, I did it with the conviction that I was defending what was sacred. But behind every decision there was an emptiness I never admitted. I told myself that doubt was a spiritual weakness, and that compassion was the first step toward the corruption of faith. I could not show hesitation, because a judge who hesitates loses respect, and a man who loses respect loses power. Mornings always began the same way. The sound of the call to prayer echoed through the streets, the smell of bitter coffee mixed with the scent of the waking city, and I walked silently to the courthouse. People looked at me with reverence, some with fear, others with hope. I wore my dark suit, adjusted my collar, and climbed the marble steps as if climbing an altar. But inside me, something was beginning to crack. At night, when the voices ceased and the court slept, I found myself surrounded by ghosts. Faces of men and women I had condemned, looks of despair, screams that seemed endless. I remembered mothers begging for mercy, children crying in the back of the courtroom. I convinced myself that justice demanded sacrifices. But what kind of sacrifices were these, if the only one who seemed to be bleeding inside was me? My wife Samira began to notice the heavy silence that hovered over our home. She said I no longer looked into her eyes, that my heart was absent. I told her it was only the weight of my position. But in truth, what consumed me was something I could not name. My son, Amir, still a small boy, would hide when I came home. I did not shout. I did not hit. But the look I carried was enough to drive him away. I was feared both inside and outside my home. And that was the proof of my success, or at least, that was what I believed. During trials, I observed every defendant with trained eyes. One gesture, one word, and I had already formed my judgment. I saw myself as the guardian of purity. And among the accused, there was always one group that disturbed me more than any other: the Christians. I saw them as traitors to the faith, heretics disguised as martyrs. Their prayers, their songs, their hope amid suffering, all of it irritated me. How could they seem so free even when they were in chains? I remember one case in particular many years ago. A young Christian man was brought to court. He did not deny his faith, even before my sentence. "Judge," he said, "the Lord I serve teaches me to pray for you." I laughed. I said that his faith would not save him. But that night, that phrase repeated in my mind like a disturbing echo. I ignored it until the silence became unbearable. The years went by, and with them came weariness. The decisions began to weigh heavier than before. The pen that once felt like a sword now trembled in my hand. And then came the day that marked the beginning of my downfall and my redemption. It was a stifling morning, and the courtroom was full. Before me stood a Christian woman with a serene face and a steady gaze. She was accused of blasphemy. The law was clear, but something about her unsettled me. She did not beg. She did not cry. She simply looked at me with compassion. Before I could pronounce the sentence, she said in a calm voice, "Judge, I forgive you." Those words cut me like blades. Forgive? She was the condemned one, and yet she offered me forgiveness. I tried to continue the trial, but my hands trembled. When I signed the document, I did not see just a signature. I saw the reflection of my own prison. In the following weeks, her face haunted me. I tried to pray, but the silence was absolute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw hers. I began to lose sleep, peace, and confidence in what I believed. Samira said I looked pale, distracted. Amir asked if I was sick. I did not know how to answer. Then the unexpected happened. An armed attack struck the courthouse one morning during hearings. The sound of the explosion threw me against the wall. Shattered glass, dust, screams. Chaos took over everything. When I opened my eyes, blood was running down my face and my vision was blurred. Half of my body burned and the world spun. I clung to life with what little strength I had left, not knowing that this would be the beginning of my true judgment. I was taken to the hospital unconscious. When I woke up, days later, the room was silent. The pain was unbearable, and the doctor said I had lost part of my sight. I, the man who judged others, now depended on the hands of strangers to survive. I spent weeks lying in bed, hearing only the sound of the heart monitor and my own thoughts. It was there, in the bed of weakness, that I began to realize how far I had drifted from the one I claimed to serve. To distract my mind, I asked for an old phone. I started watching videos in English, anything to pull me out of the darkness. Then, by chance, I found a video of an American man named Charlie Kirk, debating with a former Muslim who had converted. The title said something about the truth that sets you free. I clicked out of curiosity, perhaps out of pride, perhaps out of boredom. But that video was not just a distraction. It was a sentence being rewritten by heaven itself. Charlie spoke with a serenity that unsettled me. He did not attack, he did not shout. He simply said, "Truth is not an ideology. It is a person." That sentence pierced through me like an arrow. It felt directed at me. With every word, something inside me began to move, as if old walls were starting to crumble. The former Muslim spoke about how he had found peace in Jesus. I, who was used to hearing judgments, was now being judged from within. I closed the video, but the words kept echoing. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, trying to understand why it affected me so deeply. I had heard about Jesus, of course, and in sermons and trials and accusations, but always as a symbol of heresy, never as someone real. That night, however, something changed. For the first time, I did not want to pray in the way I had been taught. I simply whispered, "If this Jesus is real, may he show himself to me." It was not a prayer, it was a challenge. I wanted proof. I wanted answers. And heaven listened. That night, sleep came heavy, as if something pulled me into a dream unlike any other. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the courtroom. But it was empty. No guards, no defendants, no sound. The walls, once covered in dark wood, were now white and radiant. The light came from above, so bright that I could barely look. Suddenly I heard footsteps echoing. The room seemed to breathe. And then a voice, firm, yet filled with tenderness, echoed through the air. "Yusuf, how many innocents have you judged?" I tried to answer, but no words came out. My lips trembled and I felt a heavy weight on my chest. The light grew stronger, and before me appeared something I cannot describe precisely. A cross made of pure light hovering in the air. From its center, a radiant figure walked toward me. I could not see a face, only a brilliance that seemed to contain all the peace and all the truth I had ever sought. The voice spoke again. "I died for those you condemned, and also for you." My legs gave out. I fell to my knees. I felt the ground tremble. But what truly shook was my soul. Fear mingled with hope. Shame melted into tears, and for the first time in decades I wept. It was not a cry of pain, but something deeper. As if each tear washed away years of guilt, the light drew closer until it surrounded me completely. I felt a warmth that did not burn but healed. A soft sound filled the air, and for a moment, Everything was silent, a silence that did not frighten, but embraced. When I awoke, the sun was streaming through the hospital window. Tears still ran down my face. I touched my eyes and realized that I could see more clearly. But the true miracle was not in my sight. It was inside me. For the first time in my entire life, I felt alive. And there, between the sound of the machines and the glow of dawn, something within me whispered, "The judge has been acquitted." I still did not know what to do or where to go. I only knew that the encounter could not have been a dream. Something had changed forever. And although I did not fully understand what was happening, I knew that the judgment had only just begun. When I woke up that morning, the room felt different. Light slipped through the cracks of the window, as if heaven itself wanted to tell me something. The distant footsteps of nurses blended with the faint hum of the machines, and for a moment I thought I was still dreaming. But something had changed, a kind of brightness that did not come only from my eyes. The doctor entered in a hurry, adjusting his glasses, and I saw the astonishment on his face. He asked me to fix my gaze on a point on the wall, and for the first time since the attack, I could see clearly. "This is impossible," he murmured. I just smiled, my eyes filled with tears. Deep down, I knew it was not impossible. It was supernatural. While the doctors talked among themselves, I felt a calm fire inside my chest, something I had never experienced before. It was not fear nor confusion, it was peace. And in the midst of that peace, a gentle voice inside me said, "You have been seen." I, who had judged so many, was now the one being judged, but in a completely different way. For the first time, I did not feel condemnation. I felt love. I spent the rest of the day in silence. I asked for a Bible, though I did not know why. I had never touched one, and had always considered that book a threat. When the nurse brought me a copy in English, my hands trembled. The weight of its pages felt lighter than air, yet their meaning was immense. I opened it at random, and my eyes fell on the Gospel of John, chapter 8. I read softly, "Let the one who is without sin cast the first stone." Those words struck me like lightning. The man who had spent half his life throwing stones, not real ones, but with sentences, with words, with judgments, now stood naked before my own guilt. A lump formed in my throat and I closed my eyes. I understood, without anyone explaining it, that the true judge does not condemn. He sets free. I spent hours reading, as if that book were the only medicine my body and soul needed. With each verse, I felt a wound heal. Not physically, but deep within, in a place medicine cannot reach. I realized that my blindness had never been about my eyes. It was about my heart. The light I had seen in the vision, that shining cross, was now beginning to illuminate the dark corners of my mind. In the days that followed, the miracle grew. The tests showed that my vision was returning, and the doctors could not explain it. They said perhaps my body was responding better than expected, but I knew. It was not my body responding. It was my soul awakening. During the nights in the hospital, I thought about everything I had done. Every sentence, every face I had condemned. I remembered the Christian woman who had said to me, "I forgive you." Those words now echoed with a new meaning. I understood what she meant. She was not speaking to me. She was speaking through me, perhaps guided by a God I had never known but who now seemed more real than the very air I breathed. The days turned into weeks, and my physical recovery came with a restlessness I could not silence. I needed to do something. I could no longer return to that chair, could no longer keep signing sentences knowing what I now knew. I felt a calling within me, not an audible voice but a certainty. It was as if Christ himself were saying, "You judged others in my name without knowing me. Now know me for real." It was the hardest and most liberating decision of my life, to renounce, to leave the position that gave me power, prestige, and security. I knew that meant losing everything, my status, my protection, my family. But how could I continue to judge when the only true judge had shown me mercy? On the morning I signed my resignation letter, I felt the same trembling in my hands that I used to feel when condemning someone. Only this time it was not fear, it was freedom. I wrote few words, but they carried the weight of an entire life. I can no longer serve the justice of men while ignoring the justice of God. I sent the letter, and, in that instant, I knew there was no turning back. My heart was at peace, but my body trembled. The news spread quickly. A respected judge, known for his rigidity, had abandoned everything, claiming to have found Jesus. The headline said I had gone insane. My colleagues called me a traitor. The institution erased me from its records. It was as if I had never existed. When I returned home, I found silence. Samira was no longer there. She left only a short note. You destroyed our life. Amir, my son, was gone too. The walls seemed to watch me with contempt. The echo of my own footsteps was deafening. And for the first time I felt the real weight of the cross I had chosen to carry. I spent days in isolation. No phone calls, no friends, no words. Only the sound of the wind and my hesitant prayers. I told God that I was alone, that I did not know what to do. And in the midst of my tears, that same peace came, not of answers, but of presence. It was as if he said, I too was abandoned, and yet I continued. That was when I realized that faith is not the end of suffering, but the beginning of courage. And with that courage, I decided to write. I took an old notebook and began to write down what I felt. At first as an outburst, then as a confession. And without realizing it, I began to write letters to those I had once condemned. I did not know if they were still alive, but I wrote anyway. I asked forgiveness from each one. I explained what had happened to me, not to justify myself, but to confess. Some letters never came back. Others were answered. One of them in particular changed something inside me. It was from a man named Elias, sentenced years before. He wrote, Judge Yusuf, I forgave you even before you asked, because that is what Christ taught me. I cried like a child. The forgiveness I sought did not come from men. It came from God through them. With time, I began recording small videos using a simple phone and a white cloth as a backdrop. I spoke softly, my heart racing. I shared what I had lived, not to show off, but to set free. I wanted others to know that no one is too far from grace. In one of those videos, I said something that came out spontaneously, without script, without rehearsal. I was blind, and the cross made me see. When I finished, I stayed silent for a few seconds. I felt a chill and realized that phrase was not mine. It was truth leaving my lips. The truth Charlie Kirk had mentioned in the video that changed my life. The truth that is not an idea. It is a person. The views began to grow. First dozens, then hundreds. And with them came comments. Some calling me brave, others calling me crazy. But for the first time, I did not need to prove anything to anyone. I knew who I was. A man who had traded the throne of human justice for the altar of divine grace. Each video I recorded was a battle. The fear of being found, the guilt of the past, the weight of losing my family. But it was also a silent victory, a seed planted in barren soil. And little by little I realized that the miracle had not ended. It had only begun to spread. Once a woman wrote to me saying she had lost her husband to an unjust sentence, but that after hearing my testimony, she was able to forgive those who had condemned him. She said, "Your repentance healed what I carried for years." I read that message several times, unable to believe it. How could something so small, a video, a confession, touch a life like that? But that was exactly what Christ did. He turned weaknesses into bridges. Even so, the nights remained long. The loneliness was heavy. Sometimes the fear of being found made me turn off the lights and pray in silence. But every time I felt close to giving up, I remembered that vision. The cross. The light. And something inside me said, "Continue." I learned that the true miracle was not having regained my sight. The true miracle was having regained my heart. Sight returned to my eyes. But faith opened my eyes to eternity. And through this new vision, I began to understand what it means to be free. Not free from suffering, but free from guilt. From that moment on, my life became a living testimony, even if hidden in the shadows. I no longer had the courtroom, the title, or the family. But I had something I had never possessed before. Peace. The same peace I found in that light that once asked me, "Yusuf, how many innocents have you judged?" And every time I remember that question, my heart fills with gratitude, because it did not come to condemn me but to heal me. And it is here, at this point in my story, that everything began to change again. Because when grace enters, hell reacts. And that was when the greatest test of my faith was about to begin. The test that would put at stake everything I had gained spiritually. But that part of the story is what you are about to understand next. The years passed like a breath. My beard turned gray. My hands gained the marks of time, but my heart, the one that was once made of stone, beat with more life than ever. I was no longer the respected judge, nor the man feared in the courts. Now I lived in silence, in a small village in the countryside, helping Christian refugees rebuild what war and hatred had destroyed. I spoke little, but listened much. Every story of pain was a mirror of my past, and every tear I wiped away was a silent prayer of gratitude. My house was simple: a wooden table, a worn Bible, and a cross hanging on the wall. Sometimes I would spend hours staring at it, remembering the light that once pierced my soul. I thought my battle was over, until the day the past knocked on my door again. It all began with news. An old acquaintance told me with a trembling voice that my son Amir, now a grown man, had joined an extremist group. The same ideas that once blinded me now burned in his heart. I froze. The blood in my veins turned cold. It was like seeing a broken mirror reflecting my old shadow. My own son, walking the same path that nearly destroyed me. I sat down, buried my head in my hands, and cried. Not an ordinary cry, a cry of despair and guilt. I had taught him fear, hardness, and judgment. And now he was repeating every step I had taken before finding grace. For weeks I searched for him. I tried sending messages, asking acquaintances to intercede. No answer. He did not want to see me. In his mind, I was the traitor of the faith, the man who had sold his soul to the enemy. Every word I heard about him felt like a sentence against me. I prayed every day, asking God to reach him, just as he had reached me. But the silence was cruel, until one night when the wind blew hard and the village slept, someone knocked on my door. 3 dry, firm knocks. My heart raced. I knew something was about to happen. When I opened it, I saw my son. He looked different, his face thinner, his eyes heavy, his body tense. In his hand he held a gun. For a moment, time stopped. He entered without asking permission. The air felt dense, almost unbreathable. "Father," he said, "I came to correct the mistake you made." His voice was cold, but it trembled. He slowly raised the gun, pointing it at me. I could not move. I only looked into his eyes and saw the same fire that once burned in me, the fire of spiritual blindness. My body reacted with fear, but my soul remained in peace. I took a slow step forward and spoke softly. "Amir, I know what you feel. I have been there, in that same place, thinking I was defending the truth, when in fact I was fighting against it." He shouted, his voice breaking. "You traded truth for a lie." The tears came before I could hold them back. I took a deep breath, looked at the cross hanging on the wall, and answered, "No, son. I found the truth. And the truth has a name." For a moment, silence reigned. The sound of the rain outside seemed to echo every beat of my heart. He hesitated. His hands trembled. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between hate and love, between what he had been taught and what the Spirit was trying to show him. The gun slowly began to lower. He took a step back, breathed deeply, and left without saying another word. The door closed, and I fell to my knees. There was no certainty of anything, only faith that God was still working. The following hours were the longest of my life. I prayed without ceasing, begging God not to let my son be lost. Every memory of him as a child, running through the house, laughing in my arms, returned like an open wound. I realized that my final battle was not against the fear of dying, but against the fear of losing the one I loved most. Days passed, then weeks. I continued helping the refugees, but my heart was absent. Until one morning, as I arranged the books on the small shelf, I heard knocking at the door again. 3 knocks, like before. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. It was him. But something was different. Amir was without the gun, his eyes red and his hands trembling. He tried to speak, but his voice broke. I embraced him, and he collapsed in my arms, crying like a child. "Father, I saw," he whispered. "I saw the same video you saw." I did not understand right away. "What video?" I asked. He took a deep breath and said, "That American man, Charlie Kirk, the debate, the same words you told me about." I felt a chill run through my entire body. He continued, "I watched it only to prove you were wrong. But when he said that truth is not an idea, but a person, something happened. I felt something I cannot explain. It was as if a presence surrounded me. I tried to resist, Father. I fought. But then, I cried. And now I want to understand." I could not hold back my tears. The same one who once raised a gun against me now lifted his eyes to heaven, seeking the same light that had saved me. We knelt right there, on the cold floor of the room, and prayed together. For the first time I heard my son's voice not as an echo of my past, but as a promise of the future. During that prayer, something indescribable happened. I felt the same presence that had visited me years before, strong, serene, alive. It was as if God were saying, "What began in you is now being completed in him." I looked at Amir and saw in his eyes the same light that once made me see the cross. The days that followed were filled with tears and reconciliation. We talked for hours about everything, about faith, forgiveness, guilt, and hope. He told me how the group he was part of tried to fill the emptiness he felt, but nothing satisfied him. He said he had always been angry with me for leaving them, but that now he understood. I had not betrayed them. I had found something they had not yet known. Little by little, I saw my son transform before my eyes. The hardened gaze gave way to a gentleness I had never seen before. He began helping me with the village work, caring for refugees, and listening to the stories of others. It was like watching an old wound heal under the light of grace. One afternoon, as we were serving food to a newly arrived family, he asked me, "Father, why did God wait so long?" I smiled and answered, "Because he wanted the miracle to be complete. And complete miracles take time." It was then that I realized the final turning point was not about fear or threat. It was about the reach of forgiveness. The same God who freed me inside a hospital was now freeing my son inside his own soul. Salvation had multiplied, and the love that began with one judgment ended with two hearts reconciled. From that moment on, my life gained a new purpose. Amir and I decided to stay in that village, dedicating our days to those who needed a new beginning. We built shelters, created a small prayer space, and began teaching about forgiveness and reconciliation. People came from afar, not to hear us as leaders, but to see what God could do with the impossible. During this time that I began writing my book, a simple but true testimony. I gave it the title, "The Judge Who Found Grace." I did not write it to sell or to prove anything. I wrote it to remember, to record that a man can fall 1,000 times, but just one touch of grace is enough to make him rise differently. Over time, someone recorded one of our sermons and uploaded it to the internet. Days later, messages began arriving from all over the world. People who had watched said they had felt something unexplainable. Some were former radicals, others skeptics, others simply tired of pain. They all had one thing in common. They were searching for the same peace we had found. My testimony, which was once born out of shame, became a source of hope for thousands. And ironically, it was YouTube, the same place where I had first watched Charlie Kirk, that now became the stage where the miracle spread. To this day, I receive messages from people saying, "Yusuf, your story made me believe there is still forgiveness for me." Each one is a reminder that it was not in vain. Amir now helps edit the videos, replies to comments, and records short clips sharing his own experience. Sometimes he smiles and says to me, "Father, if you had not fallen, I would have never learned how to rise." And I think, it is true, because forgiveness does not end with the one who receives it. It begins anew with the one who passes it on. Today, when I walk into my home and see that same cross hanging on the wall, I feel no guilt or shame. I feel gratitude. The cross that once symbolized the end of my life is now the symbol of a new beginning. I look at it and remember the light, the hospital, the voice that called me by name. And I think of how many times I tried to erase the past when, in truth, God only wanted to rewrite the story. That cross is not a reminder of pain, but of freedom. It reminds me that the justice I once sought with my hands was replaced by the grace I received on my knees. And it is with this vision, the vision of someone who has seen the impossible happen twice, that I continue, every day, to bear witness to the power that turns fear into faith, hatred into love, and condemnation into new life.
And if you've made it this far, it's because your heart also felt the weight and the beauty of this testimony. Yusuf's story is not just about a judge who found faith. It's about a God who never gave up on reaching the most distant hearts. A man who once judged lives but ended up being judged by love. And maybe today, that same love is knocking at the door of your heart. The forgiveness that transformed Yusuf's past is available for me, for you, for everyone. Because when the cross enters, judgment ends and grace begins. If this story spoke to you, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, leave your like, and write in the comments, "I love Jesus," so that this message can reach even more people. And get ready. The next video that's appearing on the screen will give you chills. It's the testimony of a daughter of an imam who was taught to hate Christians until the day Jesus called her name. You won't want to miss it.